Welcome back to HoopsHype Show, around the beat that brings you the pulse of every team. This week, we have the Portland Trail Blazers. We're joined by Sean Highkin of the Rose Garden Report. How are you doing today?
I'm good, man. It's good to see you guys.
Likewise. By the way, I wanted to say I've been admiring your poster collection behind you. First off, Pearl Jam and some of these other bands that you have back here.
9 Inch Nails one, yeah.
Yeah, that is.
I have and actually last night I fulfilled my legal obligation duties as a, how when you're a doctor you have to go through continuing education at a certain number of times in order to keep your license or whatever.
Yeah.
When you're a sports journalist, when you're in that profession, you have to, you're legally obligated in order to keep your license and your credentials or whatever to go to a Bruce Springsteen concert every so often. And so I went to see him last night. So I had to fulfill my obligations there.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I think I need to fulfill mine because I've never been to a Bruce Springsteen concert. So I guess
he's still pretty good. He's not, I'll say this. I think last night, I've seen him probably 3-4 times now. He's still really good. He's starting to sound a little bit more like he's 76 years old now. I think it's I think it was a solid B for a Springsteen show, which is an A+ for anybody else because his standard is insane. But it was an interesting show. It was it was a little bit of a different set list than he usually does. He didn't do Rosalita. He didn't do Thunder Road. He did a lot. It was a lot heavier on the political songs because that was the theme and the message of the tour. But the thing that was cool about it though was that Tom Morello actually was is on the tour and plays half the set with him in just playing guitar in his band and does a couple and takes a couple of solos on a couple of songs. So it was good.
That's really cool.
And now I've kept my sports writer requirement, education requirements up to date.
Totally. Plus, you just told us you went on a wicked road trip that took you from coast to coast.
Yeah,
and now you're back home.
Yeah, good thing there's no problem with air travel these days.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean,
the day I flew from Denver into, this is the absolute least thing that people want to hear about on a podcast is sports writers complaining about travel accommodations. But I flew from, after the Blazers had their 5-game road trip, I flew from Denver back to New York for Board of Governors. And the day that I was supposed to get into New York was the day that crash happened at LaGuardia. So that got all, obviously just terrible, tragic situation all around. But that was that. And then when I was flying back, the TSA lines were ridiculous. But then a couple days later, I went to LA for the game against the Clippers. And when I was going back through the line at LAX was non-existent. So it's crazy how that stuff works sometimes. But again, plus nobody wants to hear sports writers complaining about travel delays. So
yeah, at least you got to miss the rising jet fuel prices that are now hitting everything. So you probably got your flights way cheaper than you would have.
That's true. Well, I'm already dreading if the Blazers, and this is I guess a segue, if the Blazers are able to get out of the play-in and get into the playoffs, those flights are not going to be cheap to Oklahoma City or San Antonio or wherever it is that they end up going. So we'll see if it actually happens. But
speaking of the Blazers, you touched on it right there. Their team that maybe could make some noise in the play-in, but the noise around the team, obviously, besides the sell, is the recent suspension of their assistant GMs, the $100K fine. All in all, seems a little bit like a slap on the wrist for what could be I guess, deemed as tampering. And you kind of told us this, they look at Hansen Yang as someone who seemingly is going to be a part of the future for a long term, as you mentioned some of the sound bites you heard at the press conference of the sale from one of the minority owners.
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure out what's going on with that whole situation with Mike Schmitz and Sergey Oliva getting suspended, because here's the thing. So according to the press release that the league sent out about that, so first of all, $100,000 fine is, that's not very much money for, an NBA team. And I I don't know how much Mike and Serge make. I don't know what their salaries are, but I'll bet that the 2-week suspension that each of them got without pay probably covers a lot of the fine money. So, and it's also a 2-week suspension for a couple of guys who are not even the GM of the team that are in the front office. So it's like, that kind of tells you how not actually big of a deal it is. But the thing that's interesting about it is that in the press release that the league sent out about the suspension, they said that whatever the improper contact was that they had with Hansen was on a scouting trip that they took to China in December of 2023 when Hansen was playing his first season with the Qingdao Eagles in the CBA. They went over there to scout him in person. And that trip was not a secret. After, first of all, like at the time, it was like somebody caught them on Twitter and like posted it. And that was like a whole thing after they drafted him. But I did a story the week of the draft, a couple days after the draft, where I talked to Mike Schmitz pretty in depth about that trip and about how long they had been scouting Hansen and all of this stuff. And the Blazers statement was that they self-reported this violation. So I don't know where that came from. Maybe it was just that like the sale's about to close. So they just wanted to make sure, just out of an abundance of caution, every single thing that they've ever done is like documented and above board and whatever, or maybe especially because their head coach is currently under federal indictment. There's like, maybe part of it is that too. I don't think those two things are related, but as far as the Hansen, like the greater, Hansen, where he fits in with the organization, obviously he hasn't played that much with the Blazers this year because he's not ready. And they knew that he was a project when they drafted him. They knew that it was going to take a couple years for him to get to where they thought he could get to, because not only is it always really difficult for young big men to translate from either college or a different international league into the NBA from a physicality standpoint, especially as at his age, he's only 20. He turned 20 the night of the draft. But then you add on to that, there's a pretty significant language barrier with him where, I think his English has gotten a lot better. Like the other night after the Clippers game, I had a full conversation with him in English without his interpreter doing anything, which is a pretty new development for him. But going from, I've said this before, but like as far as language barriers go, if somebody's coming from Europe and they like speak Spanish or French and they're trying to learn English, you can pick that up relatively quickly. Going like the difference is from Mandarin to English. There's like no overlap at all with those languages whatsoever. So like that's like the highest degree of difficulty that there is as far as like trying to learn a new language. And you also have, because of just how many people there are in China and how many NBA fans there are in China, there's almost twice as many people in China that are NBA fans as there are people in the United States. And so you have that many people watching you, and China really hasn't had a player that's done anything in the NBA since Yao Ming. And so, all that pressure on you, plus the language barrier, plus just the physicality, adjustment that's going to come from, going from the CBA to the NBA. It's going to, they knew it was going to take some time with him. But as far as his long-term, you kind of hinted at this, Cyro, Blazers had their press conference the other day to introduce the new ownership group. And in that press conference, one of the minority owners is Andrew Chang, who is him and his wife Peggy co-founded Panda Express. They're Chinese, and obviously they founded like a Chinese fast food restaurant. So at the press conference, Andrew Chang was asked why he was interested in investing in the Blazers, because somebody told me back in February that before they invested in the Blazers, the rumor had been that they were interested in buying the Vegas expansion team whenever that happens. But when he was asked why he invested in the Blazers, he said that he's Chinese and he likes that the Blazers had a Chinese player and he sees a lot of business opportunities in China because of that. So one of the members of the new ownership group said that on the record, that that's why he bought into the group. And then one of the other major, players in the ownership group, Tom Dundon is the main owner. And I'm sure we're going to talk about him. He's the controlling owner. He's the team governor. But the other main, public-facing guy in his group is a guy named Sheil Tile, who is based in Portland. And, his wife is the head of the Oregon Health Authority, and he's kind of the local representation in the group and, kind of the more, friendly public face that they have as part of the group. He's a venture capital guy. But he did an interview with The Athletic a couple days after the sale closed. And he's Indian. And he said that one of his goals, we went to China recently and had dinner with Yao Ming, and Yao talked about how popular Hansen is, and Sheil is Indian, and like I think they're doing some diplomacy stuff in Japan too, him and his wife. So like he talked about wanting to make the Blazers into Asia's team. So you got one of the minority owners saying that he wants to make the Blazers into Asia's team, and another one of the minority owners saying on the record that he only invested in the team because they had a Chinese player. Like I think it's pretty clear that Hansen is very much an important part of the organization going forward. But to kind of on the flip side of that, when they drafted him, there were a lot of people who were skeptical of the pick and were curious about why they drafted a guy who was a projected second rounder as high as they drafted him. And there was a lot of like, oh, did they just draft him because, having a player from China is going to boost your value of your franchise or sell jerseys or whatever. From what, like I said, I know quite a lot and like I've talked quite a bit about how much work Mike and Serge, the two executives that got suspended, and the rest of the front office did scouting him for multiple years. And they probably did more work on him from like a scouting and front office standpoint than anybody else did. They drafted him for basketball reasons. They drafted him because they believe in his talent long-term. It's just, and then the business stuff is just kind of a nice bonus, but safe to say he's not somebody there, even though this rookie season has, on paper not been, what a lot of people expected after the way he looked at Summer League. Safe to say, I think he's still pretty integral to what they're doing, and he's going to have a pretty long runway.
With the expansion, from what you're saying, it doesn't sound like too serious in a way. Do you feel like is this a cover for something else? Like for something bigger
expansion?
No, with the Yang Hansen fine and the suspension with
the suspension.
Yeah.
No, I don't think it's. I mean,
okay.
if it was anything serious, they'd be suspended for more than 2 weeks and be fined more than $100,000. Yeah. This is like okay, like they probably like if Hansen ever turns into what the Blazers think he's going to turn into, that $100,000 is going to be like 1 day of jersey sales in China.
Yeah.
So like they're gonna Mike and Serge are gonna be okay. Hansen's gonna be okay. I don't think this situation on the scale of situations that the Blazers have going on with, like I said earlier, their head coach is currently is facing federal wire fraud and money laundering charges and is under indictment by the FBI. Like I don't think they're losing too much sleep over a couple of their assistant GMs being suspended for 2 weeks over a scouting trip that they took 3 years ago.
With just seeing young Hansen, you just mentioned that he should be there for the foreseeable future.
Yeah.
Donovan Clingan is really taking his game to a next level here in his second year. In terms of a fit there, like I don't see how they both can play this on this court together, but like a long-term thing, like do you see what do you see there? Because Clingan definitely seems like a starting NBA center, and then if you see young Hansen in the future, like what's going to happen there in terms of the centers?
Right now, just as you said, yeah, Clingan is very clearly not only a starting caliber NBA center, a very good starting NBA center. The leap that he's made, not just in his conditioning and his ability to stay on the court for more than 20 minutes and actually play starter minutes. That's, a complete, night and day from last year, but also just his production and his comfort level on the offensive end of the floor. He's definitely somebody that the Blazers view as a long-term piece. But as far as how he fits with young Hansen, I agree with you. I don't think there's really much of a way for the two of them to play together unless one of them, really turns into a stretch five or, one of them really, develops as a guy who can defend on the perimeter, which as great of a defender as Donovan is from a rim protection standpoint, he's not really much, he still kind of gets burned a lot when he has to guard stretch big. So if he can never develop that, then maybe it becomes easier for the two of them to play together. But as far as the two of them long-term, even if they're not going to share the court together, I think the idea there, first of all, it was like a talent swing. If they thought that Hansen had like a real, chance to be kind of this under the radar find, their attitude at the time was the team is still not good enough to not take a swing on a talent like that, regardless of positional fit. So that's part of it. But also having multiple centers on your roster who can kind of give you a different look depending on what the what the matchups are like. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, but this is all going to be contingent on Hansen actually developing into what they think he can develop into, and he's quite far away from that right now.
To follow that up about his development, recently in the G.
Yeah.
What he had that
Yeah.
game where, dude, he was on fire. I think 7 of
He looks
7. The three
played
looks decent.
Yeah, he's played a lot. That's the thing that I think is pretty encouraging about this season. Obviously, he's had a couple of games where he's looked all right when he's played for the Blazers, but for the most part, when he plays in the NBA, it's like pretty obvious that he's just isn't ready yet. But when you watch him in the G League, and I've gone to quite a lot of his remix games because they play at a gym that's pretty close to where I live, so I go to a lot of their games, and so I've seen him play a lot in the G League. He looks in the G League like he looked at Summer League in terms of the way that they're using him, and they basically like have him at the top of the key, basically like running the offense and, you know, being kind of that, you know, the hub of all that stuff. And yeah, like you said, the three is getting more comfortable. He's getting better defensively. You know, there's so much development that he had to do. And if anything, I think the Blazers wish they could have played him just kept him in the G League the whole year, but they weren't able to because they've just had so many other injuries on the roster that you had to keep him on the active roster just to have enough bodies to be able to field a team, even if he wasn't really going to be playing much. So they didn't even get to use him in the G League as much as they maybe wanted to going into the season. But even with that aside, the way that they use him in the G League, as far as the role that he has and the way that they play through him, that's what they want to do with him long-term with the Blazers. It's just that right now, between how far away he is from being ready to do that at the NBA level and how, you know, the way their roster is set up and how many veteran players they have, like, it's just not realistic to do that right now. But that's the way that he looks in the G League and the way that they use him in the G League. That's the way that they envision long-term using him at the NBA level once he gets a little bit more ready from a physical standpoint.
Totally. He looks great. Like, honestly, like you said, even just the way I think his confidence is, and the G is so much better. Obviously, the one thing I think in the NBA that he struggles with is, and I think similar, it's like Santi Aldama, his rookie year, just that redshirt year that spent down there. It's the speed of the game where I think his per 100 possessions, he's still 7 fouls a night per 36, 5.5. Like it's, and I think this is very evident, especially with foreign players. It's learning the NBA rules and then just this understanding the speed and how to time it, that you see it a lot. I think that next year is going to be abundantly different when he's playing in the NBA, that we're going to see, like you said, what we're seeing in the G. Sam, you had something you want to follow up with?
Yeah, in terms of just Cyro talking about foul trouble with Hansen, like that was Clayton's thing, like last year. I don't know, like he was always like, do you feel like he gives advice to young Hansen on how to deal with the referee officiating in the NBA with foul troubling and anything like that?
Oh yeah, I mean, everybody tries to help him out as much as they can because they know, you know, the way that the transition is. And, you know, I actually give Donovan a lot of credit for this because they drafted him with the 7th overall pick a year ago. And you could have seen him a year later, they draft another guy at his position in the first round. You could have seen him being like, wait, what is this about? Like, why are they not committed to me? What's the deal? But he's been great with Hansen. Like, they've, you know, become pretty good buddies. They, you know, Donovan actually, like, on a day off one time, like in December, the remix had a game like at 10 a.m. because on a Saturday, because it was like a kids field trip game or whatever. But Donovan like just came to that 10 a.m. G League game just like to support Hansen. So like there is a lot of that going on. And I think a big part of it for Hansen, like I said earlier, is that over the course of the season, his ability to speak English and understand English has just gotten so dramatically better. Like, he still has his interpreter around all the time, but his interpreter doesn't have to do everything now. He doesn't, like, he can just kind of be off somewhere else, and Hansen could be sitting on the bench with a teammate or a coach and having a conversation and understanding what was going on. Like, I can have a basic conversation with him without his translator doing anything. Like, and that's just such a, because at the beginning of the season, I remember I went to their first preseason game at Golden State, and he did not look good in that game. He just like looked completely lost when they put him in the game. And Chauncey said afterwards that it was really, you know, Hansen, like, because of like the loud noises combined with him not really speaking English and his interpreter having to tell him like right away what the coaches were trying to say, plus it being like a loud arena, that was basically impossible for him. And now he's at the point where if the coach is telling him something, he can mostly just understand what he's being told without his interpreter even having to get involved. So that part of it alone has just been a dramatic change from the start of the season to now. And this is going to be a pretty big summer for him because China has a couple of Olympic qualifier games in July that I think the plan is for Hansen to play in. He didn't play any of the national team stuff last summer because they wanted to just keep him in the US and get him ready for his rookie season. But I think the plan is for him to play in a couple of Olympic qualifier games. And then I don't know for sure what the plan is for Summer League. I think they're probably going to do what teams usually do with second-year guys because Hansen's kind of already proven that he's too good for Summer League. So they might just play him in the first 2 games and let the NBA get some TV ratings in China for a couple of Summer League games and then shut him down if he plays as well as he played in the last game. But I'm going to be really interested to see if he stays in the U.S. for most of the summer and continues to get comfortable here, or if he goes back to China for a while to visit his family. I think the Blazers and Clutch would both prefer that he stay in America, but we'll see what happens. But just like with Clingan, I mean, you look at the leap that Clingan made from how physically comfortable he is and how how much he's able to actually play extended minutes without getting tired because he has a full off season of NBA conditioning under his belt now and working with NBA trainers and doing NBA level workouts and all that stuff. Look at how big the difference was from year 1 to year 2 with Donovan. And that was age 21 to age 22. And Donovan already was playing at UConn for Dan Hurley, who's kind of a lunatic as far as college coaches go and how hard he works guys. And it still took Donovan a year to get from there to where he is now from a readiness standpoint. And Donovan went from age 21 to age 22. Hansen is still only 20 and has a pretty significant language barrier still. So there's a pretty long runway for him.
Donovan, though, this February, okay? Oh my, 46% from 3, 4 a night. And I know some people are going to be like, well, he's had this stretch of 5 games of single digit games where kind of took the foot off the pedal a bit in terms of how well he was playing. What's your thoughts on what led to that insane stretch he had from the end of January, all of February to a little bit of March? And then what has changed that I guess he's petered off a little bit this month in terms of still defensively and rebounding, he's great, but the aggressiveness he was having on offense was unreal in February.
It's so weird. Every so often, I agree with you. He's been phenomenal this season. I think you could make the argument that he's been the Blazers' second best player this year behind Denny Avdia. But he has games sometimes, and the game against Dallas last week that they lost was one of them where Donovan just would get a wide open dunk or a layup, and he just could not finish it. And it was one of those things where you're watching it and you're and it's dude, and it's Dallas wasn't playing Daniel Gafford or Derek Lively or any of their real centers. So it was dude, you're taller than everybody else on the court. What are you doing? Why can't you just finish that? So there's still games like that where he's just totally uncomfortable. And there were some matchups like Jared Allen, he had a really rough time with when they played the Cavs. There are some matchups that are just not good matchups for him. The shooting is interesting because when they drafted him 2 years ago, they were very big. He never was a 3-point shooter at all when he was at UConn. And even from his introductory press conference and from some of the stuff that the team put out from the front office about how they scouted him, they believed from the beginning that, once he gets into the NBA, he could shoot NBA threes and turn into a Brook Lopez type of stretch big. And, most of us, when they said that, we were just yeah, all right, okay, whatever. You're going to say that about every big that comes into the league. Yeah, oh yeah, he hasn't shot. Remember, Dwight Howard used to just drain threes in practice, and he never turned into a 3-point shooter. So I think a lot of people were very skeptical of that. But it is something he's really worked on, and it's something that he puts a lot of time into. And he said when he got to Portland that the reason he never shot threes at UConn was because that was not what Dan Hurley wanted him to do. He wanted him to stay in the paint, but since the Blazers see him as maybe somebody who can be a step out and hit a three, that's something he's actually worked on adding to his game. And I don't know what the ceiling is for that, but it's at least gotten to the point now this season where if he has an open three, I don't think they're ever going to be just drawing up plays specifically to get Donovan Clingan a 3-pointer, but he's gotten good enough at them now that A, you have to put somebody on him when he's out there, and B, if he has an open three, he should just take it. That's how far it's gotten now.
You want to hear a funny story? During pre-draft, I'd written it was my first year doing scouting reports for HoopsHype, and I write Donovan Clingan's scouting report, and I say something like, oh, like we've seen, like, basically what she said, we've seen clips of him shooting threes, but like it's a little elongated. Like, I don't think he'll ever be a 3-point shooter, something like that. Like a very
a lot of people thought that.
Like something like that. I get a text at 7 a.m. the next day from Sean Kennedy, his agent, sending me a video of him at Miami-Dade College gym shooting threes around the world, and going, he's awesome. Like, so you think you can't shoot threes? And I was like,
well, I mean, like I said earlier, they used to always show those videos of like Dwight Howard draining 3-pointers in practice, and it's like, yeah, plenty of guys who make every single three in an empty gym don't shoot threes. So when the Blazers talked about, oh yeah, we actually think Donovan could be a good 3-point shooter, we were all kind of skeptical because he never really did that at UConn, but he's put the work in and he's actually added that to his game now.
Yeah, completely. It's been incredible. Sam?
Yeah, I mean, like just to finish this topic off, but like I've seen JaVale McGee hit like so many in a row, during practice too. So like all these guys can shoot. Let's not like, it's just, can they do it in the game? That's like a totally different conversation. Just with what's it like just having Damian Lillard back with the team now? What are the vibes like with the team?
Well, so Dame, I haven't really gotten to talk to Dame that much this year because obviously I know Dame very well because I covered most of his career in Portland before he got traded, but I haven't really gotten to talk to him that much just because since he's injured the whole year, he's not really doing media and stuff because he doesn't have to, but he's pretty much around. He doesn't go on every single road trip with the team, but he goes on a lot of them, and you know, he's around. His locker is next to Scoots. He's always talking to different guys. He's pretty active on the bench. You know, I think as far as his rehab is concerned, like he said this after the 3-point contest that he did at All-Star, that if he was 5 years younger after he did the 3-point contest, he would have been pushing to try to play this season. But since he's 36 years or 35, I guess now, he'll be 36 next season. And he just wants to completely just slow play it and make sure and have a full summer and a full training camp before he tries to play again. But I think it's been really good to have him around, especially as this ownership change happens, because I think, and which by the way, Dame was really, really lucky that he got a no trade clause in his contract, because there's no guarantee that Tom Dundon is going to want to keep him around just from a calculated, cold, basketball standpoint. Like that's kind of how he operates, but Dame got a no trade clause. But I do think that generally speaking in the organization, there's going to be, and I'm sure we're going to get into this later, there's going to be a lot of kind of culture shock going from the way that things have been run under the Paul Allen estate for the last 8 years since Paul Allen died to the way that Tom Dundon operates and the way that he has already talking about having way higher standards and being way more demanding. And so I think a lot of people are going to have to change a lot of things about how they do their work, both on the basketball side and on the business side. And I think having Dame around as like a guy that A, is adaptable to that type of environment, but B, just is a guy that everybody loves, that everybody in the organization has a great relationship, that has a literally 100% approval rating in Portland. Like having somebody around like that while this crazy ownership transition is going on, I think is going to be pretty helpful. And I'm curious to see what he looks like on the court next year too. My personal expectations are kind of, I'm keeping them pretty reasonable because again, he's going to be 36 coming off a torn Achilles. He wasn't a good defender before the injury, and it's going to be even more of a liability now. I don't know if he's going to be able to start or play like real starter minutes at that age coming off of that injury. Obviously, he can still shoot it. We saw him win the 3-point contest, but like, is he going to come in expecting to start because he is who he is for the organization and play starter minutes? Or is they going to, if they keep Scoot around or Jrue or whatever, are they going to bring Dame off the bench and have him kind of be a sixth man? Is that the phase he's at in his career, like Carmelo Anthony was when he was here kind of towards the end of his career? I don't know. I'm really curious to see how that goes, but that's another thing that has just kind of been in the background. Nobody's really thought about it much nationally because he hasn't played the whole year, but like, yeah, next year when they play opening night, Damian Lillard is going to play basketball for the Portland Trail Blazers again, and I'm really interested to see how that goes.
Just with like you're just talking about him, maybe his limitations will on defense, especially like what's in terms of Jrue Holiday, like is he? Do you think he'll be traded this summer? Like, what do you see his future in Portland?
I have no idea. I think there are 3 guys that are definitely long-term guys that you keep and build around, and that is Donovan Clingan, who we just talked about, Denny Avdia, obviously, and Toumani Camara. And then obviously Dame's not going anywhere because he's got a no trade clause, and we've talked about how how the new ownership group views young Hansen and how the front office is still really high on him. Outside of those 5, I think everything is pretty much up to subject to change. I think they could keep Jrue. Drew's been really good, especially lately as they've kind of had this push towards the play, and he's had a couple of huge games. He hit 7 threes in each of their last 2 games that really kept them alive and stopped some of the Clippers runs in that Clippers game on Tuesday. And he's been pretty good. But I also think he's rebuilt his value a little bit as far as, the last season that he had in Boston where his value was kind of lower and they, got him and then he had some injuries, but he's been pretty good since he's played. So, I think they could keep him. I think they could trade him. I don't think there's really I think it's going to depend on what his market is now on the trade market. The guys that I named, I think are the only 5 guys that I don't think are really on the table to be traded. Anybody else, I think, is at least, you have to at least take offers. And, if they get, real value for Jrue, if they can get like a, first round pick from somebody or something like that, then I don't think you should be closed off to trading him. But he's been pretty important to them this season when they've had all these other injuries, keeping them kind of afloat and stabilizing them. And he's also been, just like Dame, he's been a really good locker room guy and a veteran and a culture guy and all that stuff. So I don't know. To answer your question, I don't know. I could see it going either way pretty easily.
Definitely. And speaking of guys being moved, Scoot, Shaedon, what is first off? Shaedon, his development, like he's gotten better every year. If you look statistically, all the stats have like increased. Like he's gotten more efficient, and there's things to like, but like the impacting and winning, I don't like. While he's on the court, is it there, or is he more just a microwave? And then Scoot, it's a really weird year in the sense that the injury, there was not a lot of clarity of the severity of the injury. It felt like, and I think that you guys didn't even know. And I felt like the team kept that maybe a bit secretive. And also it's a weird situation with Jrue, Denny Avdia, now Dame. Like a lot of people even Shaedon need the ball in their hands to be effective. And they're all kind of either secondary playmakers or more primary playmakers. So how does the timeline move with them? And then obviously Scoot's going to become extension eligible, and Shaedon just signed, I think, a decently valued extension. So what's those 2 guys where they could become integral parts of this team, or they could maybe be seen as trade chips for something maybe bigger? And I find those 2 guys very interesting because of what they bring to the table and the flashes that they brought. But it's just like, is that a cornerstone or not?
That's kind of where they are. And that's why I didn't include them in the list of those guys that I think are definitely like 100% going to be around long term. I think there's a world where both of them could be, but I guess so. With Shaedon, he's the most talented player on the entire roster. And, obviously, what the athleticism is. You've seen the dunks, you've seen the highlights. Like you said, he's gotten more efficient as a shooter year over year. But, he has the physical tools and the ability to be a really elite defender. Like the physical talent is there for all of that. The issue with him over the course of time, and this has kind of fluctuated, it's gone, sometimes it's been up, sometimes it's been down, has been just kind of the general effort and focus. Like last season, when they went on that run, the second half of the year, the day that run started was a game against the Bulls. And before that game, Chauncey told us that he was moving Shaedon to the bench and putting Chris Murray in the starting lineup. And we asked him why. And he said, because I haven't liked the way that Shaedon has been engaged on defense lately. Like he said that publicly. The coach said that. And then Shaedon, to his credit, responded by improving on that end and winning his starting job back. But it's kind of it's kind of come and gone, that part of it. And, leading up to him getting that extension, there was like a question during training camp of who's going to get the 5th starting spot. Is it going to be Shaedon or is it going to be Jeremy Grant? And in training camp, Shaedon came out and he took that spot and he earned it. And then he got that extension. And since then, it's been kind of a similar thing. There are nights where he looks or he's completely engaged on that end. And there are some nights where he's either taking possessions off or he doesn't really know where to be or whatever it is. I think Shaedon, if you took Scoot's, I'll put it this way, if you put Scoot's attitude and mentality and work ethic and how much he's in the gym and all that stuff, if you put that stuff in Shaedon's body, he would be Anthony Edwards. But instead, Shaedon as of right now, he kind of is, we're talking about him as we don't really know what he is long-term, and he's got some incredible talent and flashes, and we don't know if it's going to become a consistent thing. I agree with you that the extension that they signed him to is pretty reasonable, 4 years, 90. So that's what, $22 million a year. That's pretty reasonable in the new cap environment for a guy who's either a 5th starter or a 6th man. That's just kind of the market value. So it's also a situation that just like with Jrue, it could go either way, where that contract I think is reasonable enough that if they do keep him around and he just kind of stays as the level of player that he is right now and doesn't take that next leap into an all-star, that's still not a terrible contract to have on the books, but there's also still enough upside and he's on that type of contract that you could see another team talking themselves into, hey, if we get him into our environment, we can turn him into, what, people thought he could be when he went 7th overall in the draft. But, overall, I could kind of see that going either way with Shaedon, honestly. And with Scoot, it's this year was just so brutal for him because after the Jrue Holiday trade, Scoot spent pretty much the whole offseason, or a lot of it, in LA with Jrue, doing all of Jrue's private workout stuff at UCLA and working with Jrue's trainers and doing all of his off-season routines and learning from him. And that went really well. And everybody in the organization was really excited about how the summer that Scoot had, and everybody was ready for him to have a breakout year and build on what he did the second half of last season. And then the week before training camp, he was playing in a pickup run at the practice facility and tore his hamstring and then missed the first 50 games of the season. So I don't know, man. That's just, it's brutal. And then, he's come back and he's had some games where he's looked really good. And then he's had some other games where some of the issues from the first couple of years in the league have cropped up, where he's not really able to finish as strongly as you would think he would, or the shot isn't there, or, he turns the ball over, kind of makes reckless decisions with the ball sometimes. So it's still a situation where, as you said, he's extension eligible this summer going into year 4. They still don't really know what he is long-term. So that's another one where I could see that one going either way. They could say, look, we still believe in Scoot. We've seen enough that we think, he's worth continuing to invest in. We're going to keep him around. Or they could say, hey, this isn't working out. We could, let's see if we can trade him somewhere and maybe he can get a fresh start somewhere else. Everything I think is on the table right now for both of those guys.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, just talking about just coaches now, Tiago Splitter.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts? Do you think he'll get rid of the interim and just be called the head coach now?
Well, the guy that's going to make that decision has owned the team for 3 days, so I don't really have too much of a read on it. I think if it wasn't for the ownership change and an organization was going to be status quo, I definitely think that Joe Cronin would want to keep him around and remove the interim tag and at least give him a shot for the next season to start from scratch, with a fresh start and a full training camp as the head coach. Because I think when you look objectively at the situation that Tiago inherited, he came here to be an assistant coach, and then on the second day of the season, the head coach was arrested by the FBI in the middle of the night after the season opener, and Tiago suddenly was like, okay, well, I'm the head coach now. I guess, cool, okay. So between that and, the amount of injuries they've had, like I said, with Scoot being out for most of the season before he came back, Jrue Holiday missed a couple of months, Jeremy Grant missed a bunch of time. They pretty much have had guys in and out the whole year. And despite all of that, they currently have 40 wins. So they're going to almost definitely finish at or above 500. They're going to be in the play-in. Objectively, you can look at it and say Tiago's done about as good a job as anybody could do given the circumstances. So if they wanted to bring him back, I think that would be a very reasonable decision to make. But I just have the wild card here is the new owner, and I have no idea what the new owner is going to do. We asked him about it at the press conference that they had to introduce him the other day, and he basically said, Tiago's done a really good job, and I'm curious to see where this goes because my expectation is to win. So that makes me think that if the Blazers get through the play-in and make the playoffs, then there's a good chance that Tiago will keep his job. And if not, then maybe there's a chance that the new owner says, okay, we're going to go in a different direction. I think that probably the most likely thing that happens is they don't make a decision right at the beginning of the offseason, and they go through a process and interview head coaching candidates, and Tiago is a candidate in that coaching search where they're considering keeping him and he's in the mix, but they're also talking to outside candidates because the Blazers haven't had a real coaching search as an organization since 2012 when they hired Terry Stotts, because when they fired Terry and they hired Chauncey Billups, that was like the fakest coaching search process of all time. Neil Olshey was always going to hire him, and the Becky Hammond thing was like a PR makeup call when people started getting mad about Chauncey because of the sexual assault allegation. Like Chauncey was the only one that was ever going to get that job. Everything else was just, performative. So the Blazers as an organization haven't had a real coaching search in 14 years at this point. So even if they do ultimately decide to keep Tiago around after this year, which I think he's done a good enough job to deserve a shot, but I don't think it would be the worst thing in the world to at least also look around and talk to people from outside the organization and interview different candidates and just kind of see what's out there, because the Blazers haven't done that in a long time.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And from the way it sounds is that unless like a big name hire was able to walk through that door, because I know Tom Dundon, right? Is that how you say his last name?
Dundon, yeah.
Has done a good job of creating a winning culture with the hockey team that he bought. As for my recollection, they were actually a bottom tier team, and then he took and he was able to flip them around, and he's made seemingly good decisions as an owner, or at least willing to trust the people who he put the decisions in their hands and whatnot. Could you see it that, probably that Tiago is just gonna, as like I said, as long as it's not a big fish becomes available that wants to be there, or Dame proclaims for somebody specific, that especially that Joe Cronin brought the guy from Paris basketball. It's kind of a Tomas Isalo situation.
Yeah.
Where like,
well, I think Tiago's done a better job than Tomas Isalo.
Oh yeah.
Well, and I think the difference between the two of them is that Tiago is a former NBA player who played for Pop and won championships. So like, he's a guy that players respect. Like he has that kind of former, like he is like a Paris basketball, like EuroLeague, whatever, but he's also a former player that, players can relate to, and he's relatively young. So like that's kind of the difference between him and Isalo, even though they came from the same team in France.
Yeah, and what I really meant by that was I think they paid a decent bit of money to bring Tiago. He wasn't like a cheap assistant to put on the bench. It was almost like they put him on the bench, similar to how Brian Keefe, when Wes Unseld had his final season, where like it almost feels like there's preemptive. They want to have a guy there if anything happened. Not that they knew this was going to happen with Chauncey, but like it felt like Chauncey was going to be shown the door regardless of, unless they had an incredible season that they went on a run that he's seen. I felt like if they didn't overachieve, his days were numbered for this team. And what's your thoughts on that? Besides that, do you think they're just waiting for, I guess, the court stuff to settle to formally fire him?
Well, I don't agree with you at all. First of all, that Chauncey was on the hot seat at all. Like his contract was up after last season. They could have just easily said, okay, contract's up, we're going to just go in a different direction. And that's what, until maybe the last 2 weeks of last season, that's what I think everybody, including me, thought was going to happen. And then they were going to do a search and they were just going to do something else when his contract was up. But because they had the second half of the season that they had, and they made this play-in push when everybody thought they were going to be one of the worst teams in the NBA and going after Cooper Flagg in the lottery, he ended up getting an extension. And that opening game of the season, the night before he got arrested, they lost that game to the Timberwolves, but they looked really good. And all of the stuff that Chauncey had been talking about the identity and about, the way he wanted them to play, that was all there, even though they lost that game. So I think Chauncey was about even with the new ownership group coming in, the thing about Chauncey is that he's really good at managing up, and he's really good at kind of, dealing with management and also dealing with players. And like, I think Chauncey, if the gambling scandal, whatever, hadn't happened, I think Chauncey would be way more safe than Tiago is right now, because I think Chauncey is somebody that up until this whole thing happened, he was somebody that players respected. He was somebody that players listened to. He was somebody that players, bought into. And he was somebody that everybody, in the front office had, a comfort level with. Like, I think Chauncey was going to be around for the long term if this thing hadn't happened. Now, as far as what the future is with him, I think, yes, you're right that they can't really do anything until we see what happens from the legal standpoint, because they, obviously, even if he's somehow found not guilty, if he's cleared legally of all these charges, he's never coaching in the NBA again. Like, that's just not tenable at all. But if, the trial as of right now is supposed to start on November 2nd. And with a trial like this, apparently the government has terabytes of evidence against all of the defendants, and so it's not a trial that's going to be done in a week once the trial starts. Like, once the trial starts, it could take months or years for it to get resolved. So it's a possibility, if it actually goes to trial and goes through the whole legal process, that Chauncey is just going to be in limbo and their hands are going to kind of be tied legally from doing anything with his status for several years. I don't know if that's necessarily going to happen, because I think the FBI has a good enough conviction rate that most of these cases never really go to trial, and all the defendants usually just do some sort of plea agreement before it even goes to trial. So there's a possibility that Chauncey agrees to plead guilty in the next few months and avoid jail time. And, and if he actually pleads guilty, if there's something that happens legally that has his status changed to guilty, then the Blazers can just void his contract and fire him for cause and just get out scot-free. And so if that happens, then that's going to happen. But if they try to fire him now without a legal, without him being convicted of anything, right now, all this stuff with the poker games and all that stuff is just allegations right now that hasn't been proven one way or the other in court. And so if they try to fire him now, right now he's on unpaid leave. But if they fire him now and then eventually he's found not guilty of these charges, then you're probably dealing with like arbitration. You're dealing with like a grievance from the coaches association for him to try to get back his money that they paid him while he was on leave. So I think it's just going to be the way it is until there's a change in his status legally. And who knows how long that take. He could decide to plead guilty next month, or the whole case could go to trial and then it isn't resolved for 2 years. Either one is on the table.
I wonder if he could even plead no contest if he obviously works out a deal with the government where he's able to.
That's above my pay grade. I don't know.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
But...
No, because like that would obviously even complicate things further, because in that case, you're in a situation.
Maybe they do some sort of buyout agreement, or I don't know how that's going to work.
Yeah.
Like I said, Chauncey's never coaching in the NBA again, no matter what happens. But as far as his status with the Blazers, there's no answers, and then nobody has any answers. I actually asked Adam Silver about that when I talked to him at Board of Governors last week about whether that was a league decision, and he said, I don't know, and I haven't really talked to the team about it. So I think everything is just going to be in a holding pattern until something happens with the court case either way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sam?
Yeah, just like we've been talking about, or kind of teasing the whole show about Tom Dundon. Now that we can kind of start. I was talking to a media member the other night about Tom Dundon, and when he owned the Carolina Hurricanes, or he still does, but the things he's focused on was improving the team, the staff, and everything. But in terms of improving like the arena and stuff like that, he's more of he might not do it more so than the team and stuff. And I remember Adam Silver talking about in terms of the Portland team, he wanted to see, I don't know if he said I forgot if he said a new arena or like major renovations to Moda Center already. So just from what you've seen, what you're hearing, like what are your thoughts on him in terms of the arena itself and just Tom Dundon in general? Like and I guess you won't really know until you see, but from what you've read, people you talk to, what do you feel like he's going to do for the organization?
So as far as the arena stuff, Adam Silver said last summer, while the sale process was still ongoing before we knew who was going to buy the team, Adam Silver said at the Vegas Board of Governors meeting that Portland needs a new arena. And so that obviously made some waves locally when he said that on the record. But the Blazers, they're not building a new arena. They are currently in the process of pursuing public funding for pretty major updates to the Moda Center. The plan is for them to do 3 summers in 27, 28, and 29 of pretty major work on the building and the campus and just really getting it up to, because the thing about Moda Center, and I've said this the whole time whenever the topic of a new arena has come up, structurally, it's a pretty good building. Like, it's a solid building. The foundation is good. It's kind of old because it was built 30 years ago and has never undergone a real renovation. And so there's some stuff about it that's out of date, but it's a good building. It absolutely does not need to be torn down and replaced. And I think the Blazers realize, A, that they have a good building in a good location, and B, it would cost a lot more money to build a new arena than it would to just renovate it. And so what they're doing now is they're currently negotiating a deal with the state, the county, and the city for $600 million in funding that's coming from a few different sources. The state part of it is going to come from income taxes on player salaries with the team. So it's like the quote unquote jock tax thing. That's where most of that money is going to come from. They're negotiating right now with the city council and with Multnomah County about where their part of the funding is going to come from. The state part of it already passed the state legislature, so that's locked in. I think about $365 million of it. The rest of it is still being negotiated between the city and the county, but everybody's expecting that all of that is going to get done, and they're going to have all that buttoned up pretty quickly. And Tom Dundon and the team have already said that once they have the funding locked in for these updates, then he's going to sign a 20-year lease for, to keep playing at that arena. So that part of it, I think, is going to get resolved. And then the other part is that eventually he's going to want to do what he's doing in Carolina, which is once they got the arena funding from the government, he's going to invest in building a whole entertainment district around the arena. Because right now at Moda Center, I don't know if either of you have ever been to a game there, but there's really not anything around the arena. Whereas you go to other arenas, like Phoenix is one that I was really impressed with recently when I went there earlier in the season. You go around like the whole radius, like the blocks around the arena. There's restaurants, there's bars, there's apartment buildings, there's all this stuff. There's not really anything around Moda Center. And I think the idea is once they have the deal in place for these renovations, they also want to work on turning it into, a place that has restaurants and bars and things for people to do in that area besides just going to an event at the arena.
With Tom Dundon, like, I know, like, in terms of the Jody Allen, Paul Allen, they were very, like, not very front-facing with media. And Tom Dundon here, it's like he already did a press conference the other day, like, and then he's even said, like, we're thinking about making a big splash during the trade deadline. Like, he seems like, he's just like a total 180 from how the former ownership was, like, to him. Do you feel like this is like kind of like, I wouldn't say like Matt Ishbia. Matt Ishbia was like very brash, like just very outspoken kind of. Do you feel like there's going to be like a new owner syndrome thing here, even though I know he's owned the sports team already? Like, what are your thoughts with that?
I don't think a new owner syndrome thing is going to, I'm sure there are going to be some ways that manifests itself, but I don't think it's going to be a situation like what happened in Phoenix where Matt Ishbia takes over and then 24 hours after the sale closes, he trades like their entire decade of first round picks for Kevin Durant, and then trade for Bradley Beal the next summer and just completely destroys the, trajectory of the franchise for the next few years.
Yeah.
I don't think that's the type of everything I've read. And I've read quite a lot and talked to quite a lot of people about the way that Tom Dundon has managed the Hurricanes. He's very hands-on in the way that Matt Ishbia is hands-on. But Tom Dundon is hands-on in a way that's more analytical, and he doesn't really make impulsive decisions. His whole thing is he wants to, when he's going to make a big decision, he wants to look at every available piece of information and look at talk it through from every available angle and challenge anybody who has one idea about it. Like, okay, well, why do you want to do it that way? Why do you want to do it that way? What if we thought about this? And then One thing I have heard about him that I like is that he's apparently willing to hear out opinions that disagree with his and have a debate, and doesn't feel like he has to get the credit for being right about everything and stuff, which, I think that's a better thing than, maybe some of the stuff that Matt Ishbia did early in his tenure. Obviously, that's all just talk right now. We'll see how it plays out. But it seems like whatever his process was in Carolina has worked out pretty well. So I think he's more interested in like finding undervalued assets and, doing stuff unconventionally, as opposed to, getting the team immediately and saying like, hey, we need to just trade for Giannis tomorrow and just do it just to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that makes sense. And like, I feel like how you said his approach has literally seen from what he did with Carolina, very like he seems like also very deliberate in his hirings. He hires like very accomplished, incredible people instead of, unlike other ownerships where we've seen them kind of hire people who are maybe one Kevin Bacon point away from some sort of association, whether it be Michigan State or a team that they're coming from, like the Charlotte Hornets basically hired a bunch of Atlanta Hawks executives and stuff like that, and Atlanta Hawks people. So what is your thoughts? Is there any connections you've like maybe looked into, or anything that you think people should expect from the ownership change?
You mean as far as staff,
or even just like maybe like, like staff, or just like, will the team be a team that people see a direct, like just a change in how this ownership wants the team to operate? Or do you think he's going to give a hands-off approach to let Joe keep doing what he's been doing?
I think in the short term, from like basketball, I think there's definitely going to be a perception about the franchise that changes. That happened with Carolina, and I don't think he paid $4 billion for this team to not, also start being hands-on with it. But honestly, the vibe that I'm getting is that people on the front office staff don't think that he's really going to mess with basketball ops that much. Like, I don't think he's going to come in and just make a change for the sake of making a change. Like, and I've actually thought for a long time, and, I think this even more now after hearing from him, as far as like the way he makes decisions and the way he kind of goes through his process. I think the way he operates and the way that Joe and his staff operate are pretty similar. And so I think there's a pretty good chance that they might just all kind of vibe, and they might all say, we all kind of think the same way and this makes sense. Like, let's just kind of keep this going. Out of all of the people that I've talked to in the organization, a lot of people on the business side and support staff are pretty worried about losing their jobs. Nobody I've talked to on the front office side really thinks that much is going to change, at least in the short term. So, we'll see if that happens. He could turn around tomorrow and fire everybody, and it could all just be, completely, a complete 180. But as of right now, I think the front office is operating as if things are going to kind of, this staff wise and, this process wise, I think they're going to, Dundon might push them to be maybe more on the side of, we have this trade we're thinking about. And he kind of alluded to it at the press conference. I don't know what that trade was that he was referring to. Could have been Giannis. I could have been anything else. I don't know. But like, he would be probably on the side of, whereas with Joe, like a lot of times he'll have a deal like that he's looking at and then decide to just kind of wait on it or slow play it or whatever. Dundon might push him a little bit more to, okay, we have this deal and it's a swing, take the swing, which I don't think is the worst thing in the world. And I don't think Joe is necessarily against, being pushed to operate like that either. So I think from a personnel standpoint and a staff standpoint, I'm not coming in expecting there to be like big sweeping changes in the basketball ops department. I'm sure there are going to be some things that are streamlined in some ways, but I feel like I've thought the whole time that Joe is going to probably be okay, at least for the short term. And I still think that as of today, again, he could fire everybody tomorrow and I look like an idiot, but as of right now, I'm not expecting that to happen right now.
No, completely. Sam, you have anything else that you wanted to touch on?
Yeah, just lastly, can you just briefly tell? I know you went to New York to talk to Adam Silver at the Board of Governors like a couple of days ago. So what was that like in terms of like, I know it was very Portland centric that you can share with us?
Well, the Portland part of it, So obviously the two big the big things out of Board of Governors from a league standpoint for the press conference, one was obviously expansion, and they had the vote to agree to move forward with seeing what they can get as far as ownership groups and expansion fees for franchises in Seattle and Las Vegas, which I think everybody knew was coming for a long time. So that's like going forward to the next step now. And then obviously there's all the tanking stuff. And by the way, that's one thing about Tom Dundon that I've learned is he is not down with tanking. His attitude is, this is an entertainment product and people pay money to go see it. So we have to put a competitive team on the floor. So that's his, I think if there's an NBA franchise, just as a little bit of an aside to go back to talking about the ownership stuff, I think Tom Dundon runs the Hurricanes a lot like the Indiana Pacers, where like it's a small market team. They don't have the biggest budget, but they're super well run and they're pretty much competitive every year. They're in the playoffs every year. They make a couple of runs, but like I think he's more interested in doing that and having a team that's competitive every year than he is tearing it down and spending multiple years intentionally losing games on purpose. So this tanking reform stuff that the NBA is doing is pretty good timing for the Blazers because they're very much out of that, that phase of what they're building. They're not really in the business of like chasing lottery picks anymore. But the tanking reform stuff was a big thing at Board of Governors. I guess this NBA Europe thing, I don't know who actually wants that, but that's clearly something that Silver cares a lot about for whatever reason, probably because of the amount of money that he's going to get from different investors in it. But yeah, I guess that's still a thing he's like talking about for, whatever. But I would say those are like the three big things that really got touched on at the press conference. And as far as the Portland stuff, and I give the league office and their PR staff, like Mike Bass, Mark Broussard, Tim Frank, Maureen Coyle, I give them a lot of credit for this because the two reporters from Portland that were there for the press conference were me and Joe Freeman of the Oregonian. And Joe asked a question, just kind of a general, what are your thoughts on Tom Dundon and the Blazers sale? And Adam gave kind of just a broad answer about how he likes him and he thinks he's going to be good for the franchise. And then after the press conference was over, like I said, the main topics of the press conference were more so, expansion and tanking and other stuff like that that's more nationally relevant. But after the press conference, Adam did like a smaller little breakout session with some of the reporters from the Seattle and Vegas outlets that traveled there to talk more about the expansion stuff. And then the league PR walked him over to me and Joe Freeman and said, okay, here's the Portland guys. And they let us talk to him, just the two of us, for a few minutes. And he told us a little bit more about his thoughts on the sale and the arena situation. And he confirmed that even though he said last summer that the Blazers needed a new arena, that if they can get these renovations to Moda Center done, that's good from the league's end. He very much reiterated that the NBA is not interested in having the Blazers move from Portland, which I've never thought was a real possibility, but others have, I guess. And the other thing he said that I thought was interesting about this, and this ties into the expansion thing, is that he thinks it's going to be good for the league to have teams in both Seattle and Portland, not just from like a rivalry standpoint, because there used to be a big Blazers Sonics rivalry back in the day. And there's like rivalries between the two in other sports, like Oregon, Washington in college football, the WNBA. Now the WNBA is back in Portland. I think the Fire and the Seattle Storm are going to be a big rivalry, on the soccer teams, both the men's and the women's. There's that. So that's going to be good. But also just from a travel standpoint and a scheduling standpoint, right now, the Blazers, if you look at like those lists of like miles traveled per team on road trips, the Blazers are number one pretty much every year because right now they're just so isolated in the Pacific Northwest and there's nobody that's even close to them. There's no team that you can get to from Portland to play a road game without flying. So having a team 3 hours away by train in Seattle, like that's going to make things easier for the schedule makers. That's going to make it easier. So I think, Portland getting their arena stuff done is going to be not just good for the Blazers and the city of Portland, but it's going to be good for the NBA as a whole.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with that. And like you said, the area around the arena, if they can develop it and make it an entertainment center, there's a lot of untapped potential there, especially if they put a TIF tax there where they can just make their money back off of the money that's being
that's above my pay grade. Yeah, but yeah.
Hey, either way, Sean, we really appreciate you for coming on here. Besides Rose Garden Report, which is going to be linked in the description, is there any other outlets or links or any other places you want people to check out your work?
That's really the main thing. And if you're interested in this stuff at all, I hate to do the thing where you're like asking people for money because everything costs money and everybody has a million subscriptions. But if you're at all interested in the Portland Trailblazers and want to support, an independent journalist that's, putting a lot of resources into traveling for this stuff and, and doing this kind of work, I would encourage people to sign up for a paid subscription, because I feel like I've been doing a lot of stuff pretty in depth lately about the ownership change and about other things in the organization. And now that the WNBA season is starting, I'm going to be covering the Fire pretty regularly too. I was just at their expansion draft event yesterday where they did they finally have players now. So that's all coming up. And then also, just to plug this too, I'm also the Trailblazers insider for Rip City Radio, which is the team's flagship radio station. I have a weekly show on there. I'm on their shows all the time. I do stuff on their social media platforms, which are at Rip City Radio 620. So that's kind of where you can find me.
Awesome. I'll definitely make sure to have that all linked in the description. Again, like I told you in person, Sean, I think you do one of the best coverages, especially from an independent outlet, and really for anybody who is aspiring to be a journalist or, it is hesitant about doing an independent coverage. I think you are the I think
Standard.
what people should look at is the standard. Yeah. I was trying to think of the word. Thank you.
That's very nice of you to say. I appreciate that. I'm just kind of trying to make it all work. It's not easy, but I've kind of gotten it to a place where I'm actually able to make it work. And I realize that that's not everybody's situation. So I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah, no, completely. And like I said, when we were talking in Los Angeles, I think you should keep growing this, because you have a niche that other people don't.
That's the plan.
Yeah.
All right.
All right.
Yeah, I'll talk to you guys soon. Good.
Thanks, man. Appreciate you.
Thank you.